which brings me to just a moment to have a conversation amongst family. I've had some fascinating discussions over the last couple of weeks about where things we might not perfectly, but imperfectly, is the best we can, call politics, and the church bump up against each other. They've been very interesting conversations. And I thought I would just take a moment to talk about that a tiny bit. In our baptismal covenant, one of the promises we make is that we're going to strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. And when we try to do that, sometimes it's messy. And when we try to do that, sometimes we don't agree about how to do that. And that's just part of being human beings in relationship and in community. We at St. Peter's have a wide diversity of perspective on theology, Christology, politics. We're really diverse, and it's one of our strengths. It's part of our beauty. And as a way to honor the complexity of that, if you are curious, this is kind of how I try to compromise and come to a balance of how to be real in that space and how to empower all of you to do your best to live out the promises you've made in your baptism. I acknowledge that what is said from this pulpit has a certain level of power and authority that comes with it, and has you at a bit of a disadvantage as a captive audience. We Episcopalians are pretty polite folk. We like worship done decently and in good order. And it is very rare when an Episcopalian stands up and argues back to a sermon. Right? Anyone remember that happening in the last 30 years? I didn't think so, right? So I prefer, now the Holy Spirit does what the Holy Spirit does. I don't even write my sermons. Some of you know that, some of you don't. The Holy Spirit does what the Holy Spirit does with my preaching. But generally speaking, it's my intention that if we're going to have a conversation where there might be some disagreement, where we might be people of good faith not quite agreeing on how to interpret some of these things, kind of like the rabbis interpreting the meaning of the Sabbath, right? That we do that more in the forum environment where we can have a conversation, or around a table with a cup of coffee in a more private conversation, if that's the way people prefer to have those discussions. And I've had them. Over the years I've been with you, we've had those conversations. I've had them with liberal folk wishing that I would be more political from the pulpit. I've had it with more conservative folk wishing we would be less political in the ways we live our faith. Across the board, just so you know. Figure if everybody's unhappy, I'm probably doing my job. Holding the radical center. But what's important, I think, is that I also give you the tools to live out your faith in the world. If I'm not helping you do that, I'm also not really being a good priest. So I'm going to put stuff in the bulletin about San Diego Pride. I'm going to put stuff in the bulletin about wear orange to church Sunday. When those announcements come to us from the diocese or from you, we'll let you know. You can pick and choose. I tend to keep the stuff that we might not all agree on in spaces that are informational or educational. And that's just the way I try to thread that needle. It is not perfect. It doesn't make everybody happy. But it's how I'm trying to be faithful to my role as your priest in giving you what you need to live out your life of faith, and try to balance all the diversity we have here, which is really beautiful and interesting diversity. And I want to encourage you, my email address is on the back of the bulletin. You can be in touch with me anytime you want to ask me questions about why we do or don't do something, why we do or don't address something, or the way we do try to imperfectly. I'm happy to have those conversations anytime. And in fact, I love to. When I get to be with you in a real, vulnerable, authentic, honest conversation, even and especially when we don't agree about everything, that is holy space. That is holy ground. And God is there in that space. And it's beautiful. So please, especially as we head into the next the next 6 or 7 months are going to be a little interesting in our country, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff. It's not always going to be easy. Let's just stay together and love each other and know that Jesus calls us together and that we're going to get through all of this together in love. And if you ever have anything you want to ask me about or talk to me about or wrestle about, you know how to find me. And I love you. So.